difficult for me. My introduction. So I'm from Germany and I am a dragon. And I am a dragon. 4 words that sound so simple and yet carry so much depth for me. I am a dragon. As short as these 4 words may sound, a million words actually cannot describe what it all means to me. And even though it has been so many years since I became aware of who I really am, I often feel as if the journey has only just begun for me. Yesterday we got to hear the great panel about living as a fictionkin, and yeah, I have to say, I so often do feel like myself is being part of a story. And yeah, who knows? Maybe somewhere out there, someone is writing these lines about my and our lives right now. Who knows? I am a dragon. And I have to say, I'm a damn curious one as well. I always wanted to know how things work, what holds the world together in its innermost, as Faust would say. And in the end, I wanted to know why I am the way I am that way. And in the end, I am the center of my subjective world without expressing it too narcissistically. And out of this motivation, I began to study clinical psychology, the science of the mind, basically. And within this broad spectrum, I was then drawn more and more towards dream research and psychoanalysis. Because our dreams, the images of our deepest inner experiences of our inner world, are one of the greatest truths we can find within ourselves. We just need to know how to understand them. And with this panel, I would like to give you an insight into dream interpretation, a small toolbox, as you can say, so that you can learn to understand your own personal truths better. And I hope that this won't be too overwhelming for you. I've prepared quite a lot, but it will probably get recorded. So if you're interested, you can watch it a second time. So let's start. Actually, before we start, a small content and trigger warning. I think this is appropriate for this, for this panel here. Some content on this panel can be uncomfortable and act as a trigger. This relates to the practical part and the examples at the end of the panel in the specific. However, since this panel does not belong to the 18 plus category, this is kept within limits. But nevertheless, if you are sensitive to topics that can be upsetting, please take care of yourself. And during these parts of the panel, which I try to announce before that, grab a coffee or anything, and yeah, take care of yourself. So yeah, what are the table of contents here? First, I want to give you a brief overview of the cultural beliefs or the beliefs in different culture about dreams, what dreams are and what they are to the cultures. And then I want to give a small psychoanalytical view on the mental system because in my panel, I tried to put it as objective and based on psychological theories as it can get. And get 100% because it's a topic that is not it's still in the process of being researched on. And after the first 2 theoretical parts, we dive into a practical approach into symbolism, and then we will have a short break, about 10 minutes. And after this break, we add straight on to the purpose of dreams as they act within guides, as guides within ourselves. I'll try to show you some of the methods of dream analysis, how you can tackle and approach your own dreams, and give an example at the end. And of course, last but not least, there is going to be a small list of literature if you're interested in the topic. And you can DM me, of course. So, what are different beliefs over different cultures? I try to sum it up in small sentences here. So, in ancient Chinese mythology, dreams are actually realms that are separate from our realm, and the soul travels to these realms. And the self in this mythology has a sleeping and a waking part. In the Norse mythology, dreams are a possibility to get in contact with spirit entities such as deities or other entities. And dreams have a prophetic content, so they have a message for us. In Indian mythology, the world itself is a dream, and it's the dream of God. And during the sleep, the soul is leaving the body and yeah, delves freely in this realm. And of course, in the Greek mythology, body and soul are seen as two separate entities. And in the waking consciousness, the soul is a servant to the body. So here you can see the impact of the materialism that the Greeks had on body and mind. And only at the night, the times the connection to the body is loosened. And Hippocrates, the forefather of Western medicine, used dreams to actually find a medical diagnosis. And this was actually the first time this happens. And this is a quote: because the body is immobilized during sleep and the soul doesn't have to cope with external life situations, it can perceive deficiencies of the body and depict its condition in dream images. And this is actually pretty revolutionary if you look at the time when Hippocrates was living. Currently don't know the exact time frame, so I don't want to give any false numbers here. But this is actually the first time that the dream is seen as a mechanism to get a diagnosis, a medical diagnosis. And that, yeah, like I said, this was pretty revolutionary. And nowadays, we have what theoretical construct puts this in the bell to a lot of you. And in Sigmund Freud's point of view, a dream is the fulfillment of an unconscious desire. So basically, what stands behind everything is the latent dream. According to Freud, it's basically the true face of the dream and the true face of the mental system, and contains the desires that the mental system actually wants. But because these desires cannot be expressed in our society and in our world, we have a mental censor that is basically censoring the contents of the latent dream. And what we get is the manifested dream. And this is basically an encrypted message, encrypted due to symbolization in pictures. And we have to encrypt the message basically to get what the actual communication the dream should give us is. And to get a better understanding of the theoretical background of this, let's go into the mental sensor a little bit and look what's basically what the mental sensor is and what it is for. I think this is quite important to know. So according to Freud's theory, the mental system consists basically of three parts. It's the ego in the middle. Basically, it's the principle of reality. It's the control. So basically, that is what we experience as the self usually. It's the critical mind, and it has a suppression and delay of drives, and it's the reaction to the outside, what is basically the reactive part. In the red, that is in the bottom, the red thing is the it. It listens to the principle of desires and demands. And those are all the primal needs, as well as the mental energies that are eminent in Freud's model, the libido and the destro duo. Don't need to know exactly what this is, but that are basically driving forces that keep our mental system energized. And we have the superego on the top of this. This is basically an instance with our moral norm concepts that we have. And to illustrate this a little better, I've put a small example on the right. So we have the it that wants to eat chocolate. We just want to eat because it fulfills our basal and primal needs of getting food. But then we have our moral concepts and our norm concepts that are, built on our social structures and the cultures we're living in. And for our culture here in our Western culture, we can say a moral or norm is I cannot eat that much because I'm getting too fat. I need to have a perfect beach body, for example, that way. So what the ego does, it's building a solution. It has basically, it feels the pressure of both instances, and it's eating just a small piece of chocolate. And this is a good solution because the needs of the it and the needs of the superego are getting basically tangled out, and we have a solution. Everything is great. Now, we have problems and conflicts within ourselves that are not that easily that cannot easily be solved. For example, when we have our personal need, for example, I need my social distance. We all know that we need the distance. We need to shut our doors and just be for ourselves. And on the other spectrum, our family needs support. We have our family members that we perceive as I have to spend time with them, etc. And then what do we do then? What is best for our personal system? And we have a conflict then, and this conflict is named as dependence versus autonomy. I have my own autonomy, my own needs, and I have the dependence from others, my family. And what the mental system does is that unsolvable conflicts that are not that easily solvable gets pushed into the unconscious basically by the defense mechanisms. And these defense mechanisms, probably a lot of you also heard of, are, for example, really basal ones like projection. As an example, projection when I don't want to see bad parts of about myself on myself, I project them to others. So I see, okay, my partner is wearing a really ugly pants today, and this makes me angry. This is a classical example of a projection, but we have, of course, other defense mechanisms like humor, that we just take it with sarcasm as an example, or we fall into a regressive state that we act actually younger than we actually be. So then when something happens, we just break out in tears and cry. And that is seen in this model, of course, as a defense mechanism. And in the end, those are actually not something pathological. It's actually a highly functional part of the mental system because it is there to protect our ego. It's there to protect ourselves and that our psychic and mental integrity can be maintained. Because else, if that was not there, the conflict would basically dissolve the ego, according to theory. So, especially with Freud, many symbols have sexual character, and that was actually a point that was a long-term debate on his theory, because, for example, elongated objects should be like pictures of phalli, or boxes or cabinets should represent female parts, and so on and so forth. It's a long theory. Don't need to get into details. But this was one of the main reasons this theory was getting reworked, basically. And in general, Freud's early theory creates a rather gloomy picture of humanity, which is dominated only by lower drives and impulses that somehow have to be compressed and repressed for the sake of coexistence in the world. And as that is not something that is basically healthy. Carl Jung came up with another model that was based on Freud's model, and that is the extended theory to Carl Jung, which I want to show you a little bit, and which you probably heard yesterday in the panel of it already, at least a little bit of it. So the theory of the psychoanalyst Carl Jung complements basically Freud's theory. As a direct student of Freud, his theory focused on the individuality of the person. In order to lead a life that is the best possible mental health, the uniqueness of the person should develop in the course of its life. This is named the process of individuation, becoming who you really are. And according to this theory, by adapting to the world which is necessary to be able to exist in it, we move away from our real self. We put on a mask, and in his theory, it's called a persona. Maybe you heard of it. And the main goal during the process of individuation is to recognize these masks and become more aware of the self that lies dormant beneath these masks. And in the worldview of Jungian psychology, what is outside is also on the inside, and what is inside is also on the outside. And we should therefore not only free ourselves from being attached to collective values, norms, and role expectations, but we have internalized in our persona. But also, we should not being too attached to our unconsciouses. Letting the unconscious become conscious. That is basically the goal of Carl Jung. To a certain extent, this is the guiding principle that you can also understand the same way as enlightenment in some religions, namely, to literally, it brings light into the darkness, so that our unconscious contents do not control our lives, but we can consciously take our lives into our own hands and live it the best way possible. And also, contrary to Freud, the unconscious is not only purely individual in nature, but it has its lower areas that are not only individual in nature, but also have a collective component, and that is called the collective unconscious on the bottom. And Jung created this tiered model of the unconscious after he was confronted with the same or similar symbols and images on his journey through the myths and legends of various cultures around the world. So basically, what are the contents of this tiered layer model? So on the top is our conscious mind, so the conscious experience and reflected self. We are aware of that. The second layer is our individual subconsciousness. So it contains everything I know, but I'm not thinking about at the moment. So basically knowledge that we have, but we are not every time, we cannot activate it every time we see it. Everything I was once aware of, but now have forgotten. So something that get pushed into the unconsciousness. So it contains basically the principles of Freud. And everything that is perceived by my senses, but not observed by my consciousness. And here we have, for example, if we see something in our in a blink of an eye that we cannot perceive, usually our unconscious is conscious about it. So we get it, but not everything is get into our conscious, basically. And in the lowest part, in the collective subconscious, is a part basically of the mental system which is not personally acquired and which is common to all individuals. So this is where the fundamental forms of experience lie according to this tiered theory. And those are expressed in myths, legends, and dreams. And the contents of the collective subconscious is called the archetypes. And we heard yesterday from Witt a little bit about it. So the archetypes in themselves, they have no mental energies in them, but they are rather the rudimentary forms within the collective unconscious, which are filled with our own mental contents and thus became effective. Archetype gang, yes. Oh gosh, I'm reading it. I shouldn't do. I should concentrate. So, for example, like a glass into which one fills water, and the water itself doesn't have a shape or a form, but it gets its shape by the surrounding content, and that is basically what you can see as, metaphorically speaking, as the construct of an archetype. And yesterday we already heard some archetypes. We have the archetype of the hero, the archetype of the mother, the sage, the emperor, and so on and so forth. I can highly recommend rewatching Witt's panel if you haven't. Was just so great. Yeah, and after this short theoretical baseline that we now produce, we want to dive into symbolism. And our dreams are means of communication with the unconsciousness. And as we have seen in the last slides, to the mental sensor, the contents of the dreams are often encoded in images, in forms by symbols. And to get a feeling for understanding and interpreting symbols, I would like to do a small practical part together with you all. But please note, this is a trigger warning for this. As I said, symbols always work with and through you. And you all also put your own personal contents because you are interpreting them. And this can activate your own topic. So it will not be nothing too bad, but if you are sensitive, grab a coffee, grab a hot chocolate, get yourself comfortable, and then you can rejoin. But for us now that we feel stable to at least some point, let's continue. So what is a symbol and what is a sign? So these seem like synonyms for a lot of us, right? But compared to a sign, a symbol has an ambiguity in its meaning. So depending on which perspective I take as a viewer, the symbol develops its own meaning. One can say that the meaning of the symbol results only from the interaction of the symbol and the viewer. And that's basically what I was trying to say on the last slide as a content warning, because we always put our own experiences into an interpretation because we are a part of this world. We're not separate from it. And symbols can often be culture dependent. For example, the interpretation of the color white. In our Western civilization, color white usually stands for purity or innocence. But in Japanese, Asian cultures, this often stands for death. For us in our Western culture, death is mainly the color black here, but in Asian cultures, it's sometimes white. So it's a culture dependency on it. And this also shows that it doesn't have to be necessarily a picture. A symbol can be a meaning, basically. For example, a boss chair that I depicted here. So it could be seen objectively as a simple chair, but when we see a boss chair, okay, we see, yeah, that's a big chair and it has to be leathery and so on and so forth. That has the impression to it. And these impressions come from our own experiences, but also from our cultural and social surroundings and environment that we are living in. And on the right side, we have the sign. A sign has a direct meaning. For example, if you go on the motorway and you have the speed limit 50, you know what to do. It has no ambiguity to it. It's just, okay, you have to drive 50 miles per hour or 50 kilometers per hour, and there's no ambiguity to it. And this is basically the difference between a symbol and a sign. And yeah, for our first approach, for our first dive into the world of symbolism, I've shown you a picture of the surrealist Magritte. And one area where the symbols of mind actually begin to operate is art, and that's why I've chosen this picture. Art is an expression of the soul and an expression of the emotions, and offers a glimpse into the inner world of the artist, especially when it's not consciously created. And usually we create art with an intention, but the way the art is created and how everything interacts, it's not everything. So not everything is happening consciously. And to get a feel for the character of the symbol and how we interact with the symbol, I've put out this picture. It's from Magritte and it's called The Lovers. And I'd like you to for your own, for everyone on its own, just what do you feel with this picture? So what is your impression from this? And just because I just have it open, the panel chat, it would be great if you could write your impressions into the panel chat and not to the panel questions. That would be great, because I cannot click on the panel questions right now. What is your impression here? Go ahead, make some coffee. Secret or passion, malicious, yes. Yeah, not a healthy relationship. It's quite spooky, yes. Suffocation, yes. You can't see the person, but they are discovered by the fields. Irritation. Love makes blind. Seems a bit surreal. Yes, it's a surreal painter. Magritte was known for its surrealistic pictures. It hits close to home for me. Fascinating seeing completely different emotional reactions, and that's exactly what I was talking about. So a symbol, the meaning of a symbol is ambiguous, and we put on our own meanings and interpretation into the symbol. And what we get, the answer that we get, is not an answer that is to be answered right or wrong. It's not the right or wrong answer. It is it's valid on every answer is valid, right? So there is no right and wrong. Two strangers are interested in each other yet do not know each other. Kind of creepy, yes. So what if I may say what I see or what I experience from a on a broader level, on a meta level, is that it somehow feels unpleasing, right? Do I get this right? It's not a very positive feeling that it emerges with this picture. Yes. And yeah, I disagree. Aria, do you disagree? It's totally fine. Like I said, there is no right or wrong. And the interpretation that we apply to this symbol and to this picture is also our own, right? There is no right or wrong. Yeah. Okay, let's see what happens here. So the background to this picture is Magritte's mother actually committed suicide after a prolonged period of depression, and the body of René Magritte's mother was found in the river, and it's said that her face was wrapped in the fabric of her skirt. And it is also said that Magritte himself discovered his mother in the river, and his paintings show his inner experience and processing of this event. And you probably noticed why this gets somehow spooky, somehow unpleasant feeling in a lot of us. Yeah. And for example, if you want to now dig a little bit deeper into the interpretation of the symbol now, especially when you know this background, you could interpret that, for example, that this picture shows Magritte affection to his mother, and a part of himself has also died at the site, and therefore he himself is also wrapped in the same loincloth as he found his mother in the river. And yeah, it's actually a pretty sad and depressing feeling, of course, that emerges. At least it is for me. And what we see here is that in the upcoming pictures that Magritte drew, so German accent, I'm sorry, drew, yeah, the undertones of sadness. We can see that a lot of the upcoming pictures had like the same concept. So the face is hidden. Like what one can see from a psychological point of view in this picture of Magritte is that he drew during this time he was dealing with this traumatic event with his mother is he conceals his face through various forms. Here, for example, with an apple. Slides are behind one, I think. Let me just check. No, it should be the apple. You see the slide with the man, son of man, right?
Yes, for me it's fine.
Okay. Right now I'm seeing background text and no picture, not pictures. So what you should see is the picture with the man with an apple in front of his face and the background part that I just copied. Okay, fixed it. Great. Okay, good. Yeah, good. It's good that I have that chat open. So yeah, he conceals his face through various forms. And here, for example, with an apple. And if one goes further on the symbolic character of an apple, one can also draw a connection to the tree of knowledge from the creation myth of Christianity itself. So those who eat from the forbidden fruit, which is an apple, attain knowledge about the self. And actually, in this picture, the face will become revealed. And it's the same way the repressed memories of the traumatic incidents are revealed. And it's, yeah, it actually is, it's, I think it's crazy if you look at it from this perspective, what the mind actually can come up with. And in further pictures, Man with the Melon, he drew basically the same picture but with a different object. And here is a dove. And the symbolic character of a dove can be illustrated in this image as well. So the white dove as a symbol of freedom that can free him from his burden. Perhaps also the inner plea to finally be allowed to discard this burden. And it also has a much more dynamic appeal than the static apple in the prior picture. So the dove is in motion and it is already flying. And that could be an indication that the process of getting rid of this burden has already begun. So from a therapeutic standpoint, one can say that this is actually a therapeutic process that has actually been initiated already. Where the apple was static, the dove is in motion and is flying. And this is actually something, very positive, looking at it from a therapeutic point of view. Man with melon, which is absolute funny, contrasting. Yes, it's man with melon. Yeah, so you can say I just read accepting the fate. So when the dove is basically flew away, it reveals the face again. Yeah, and the melon is it has that's the point in serialism. So it has of course two meanings. So the melon as the fruit and the melon with the head, right? So and that was a thing with Magritte's paintings. They always had several layers of meaning. The bird's name is Melon, confirmed, yes. So in contrast to this, let's look at a second example. And maybe you know this painter and this artist is Dali, Salvador Dali, also a surrealist. Maybe you know him from his pictures of flowing time, where the clocks are basically floating away. And as this second example, I would like to show you the pictures of him. Also here, I would like to invite you to name your impressions of the pictures. What do you see? How does it affect you? Are there any areas that particularly catch your eye? What are the main differences in the painting, in this painting, compared to René Magritte from the last slide? So again, it's practical. What are your impressions here? Burning giraffe, yes. It's fever dream-like, yes. A sensory overload, yes. Chaotic, crazy. Abstract, yes. My dreams in a nutshell, messy. Yeah, it's chaotic. It really feels like a dream, yeah. Yeah, the drawers look stiff, they evoke pain. Yeah, it's also, it doesn't have a very pleasant appeal, right? But it's not, at least from my point of view, it's not the same spooky feeling as in the last slides. At least it is for me this way. Whereas spooky in quote unquotes, not sure if this is the right word, but maybe I'm missing it. Wonderland vibes, yes, exactly. So what would you say of the inner structure of these pictures? What would you say, what pictures, in your opinion, have more structure to it? For René Magritte's Man with the Melon, or those here? It reminds me of Courage, The Dog's Home in the Middle of Nowhere, Man with Melon. Yes. Yeah. So in these pictures, what you see, it's there somehow, yeah, if you can say there's more fluidity with it. So they're, if it's the right word, they're more fluid. And Man with Melon probably these also seem well thought out, yes. Yeah, just give yourself some time and just really try to maintain multiple perspectives. So what from the cognitive point, what do you think about this picture? From the emotional part, how does it emotionally affect you? Then also, what forms can you see in the picture from the objective part? How is it drawn? Are there more round or edge-like shapes, or fluid, but the details are sharply painful and violent? Hidden compartments, yes. Yes, I see. And this is also very interesting. So it just adapted from the last interpretation that it has to be something psychological, pathological, possibly, because you say it's hiding trauma. Gear up on fire. Yeah, interestingly, it reminds me of the Ten of Swords tarot card. Yes. And interestingly, it's very interesting that you say that, because here we also see like, oh, we at least draw a conclusion or comparison to tarot card and thus to archetypal depictions. Unconscious symbols, yes. Yeah, infinitively complex, yeah. And that is something that what art is really good for, that it, yeah, it is most of the time, at least, it is very complex. At least, especially, of course, surrealistic art. I could totally perform a tarot card reading with a stack of surrealistic paintings. I get you, yes. Okay, so let's check what this has to offer us. At least, yeah, what in my point of view. So at first glance, Dali's paintings seem much more dynamic than those from René Magritte. So the forms are characterized primarily by round and like feminine-looking structures. One can interpret that his inner world, which he expresses here, is unstructured somehow and disorganized. And if we take a look at the biography of Dali, and this is also very interesting to me, is that we can see that in his later stages of his life, he suffered from a psychotic illness. And it also broke out after his wife died. So from an interpretative point of view, the person to whom he had the greatest attachment in life, who probably compensated for his inner lack of structure that we can see in these pictures here, yeah, passed away. And when this was when this person was no longer there, he decompensated mentally, and his illness broke out because he didn't have this inner structure that gave him the stability. So shapes are often dynamic and round with a few sharp edges. So generally, that's also like some symbolic meaning, and it's of course to some degree also culture dependent. Everything that is round is usually seen as a feminine structure because, for example, water, where we see the cradle of life, also takes round shapes when it is in a vacuum, and is outside of gravity. And yeah, this is basically a symbolic meaning for this, and its inner world was rather unstructured, but we can see in this picture a lot of elements, not really structures, and yeah, actually compensated his lack of inner structure with a structure on the outside, which was his wife. Yes. So he built up a not, for him, of course, not conscious dependence on his wife, and in the end, he decompensated, and his mental illness broke out. And yeah, very interesting to see that in his pictures, basically. Of course, when we didn't have the biography, we probably would not, of course, come to that conclusion directly. This is only after we read this, but it, in general, this feeling of being unstructured and disorganized, that was, if I read it correctly, in the meta layer again, a lot of you noticed that, right? Yes. And Kangi, I hope I pronounce it correctly, said he painted her a lot. His wife's name was Gala, and he painted her a lot. Yes. And coming to the last examples here that I would give before, or I would show you before the break, where we're making a short break, is Louis Wayne. And it's a pretty interesting one, because as the last example, I'd like to show you the drawing of him. And he was a painter that lived from approximately, I think it was 1860 to 1993, if I got it correctly. And yeah, from my point of view, it can almost be considered as an early form of Therianism, although the term, of course, didn't exist back then. But many of his paintings show anthropomorphic representation of cats. And actually, on one postcard drawing, he wrote, "I fell in love with a lovely kitten, and that kitten was myself." And yeah, it's the first furry, yes. When I found these pictures, I thought, like, yeah, that's actually pretty interesting, right? Because that the terms Therianism, furry, they basically weren't a thing back then, at least not in a public sense, right? So that is adorably, yes. And actually like these pictures quite a lot too. And yeah, but if we see the progression of his pictures, so in his later works, however, there's an increasingly unpleasant undertone in the paintings. And if you look at the pictures on the left side, you can see a sort of experiment that is carried out with the cat, and apparently against its will and under the seemingly gleeful eyes of the nurse. And the picture on the right even is called A Cat's Nightmare. There are two cats, including the cat he said was himself. It looks pretty similar, at least, lying in bed and being looked at by the malicious eyes of many owls. And the upper left side of that picture, you can see the two other kinds of owls looking down on him, almost with pride, but also with disparagement. And based on their position and their pose, one could interpret that these could be maybe a representation of his parents. It's, of course, very, very, I would not say far-fetched, but it's a possible interpretation because they look somehow parenty to me, at least. What is your point of view? Maybe I shouldn't have said my point of view to this, but what are your impressions from the pictures? Yeah, they're different. Mom looks down with pride and dad looks away. Yeah, it looks rather than a disgusted pride. Like, it's not like an honest pride. Not that she's proud of the cat, but rather to some sort disgusted. The right pic looks straight up like paranoia. Yes. Creepy. There are so many more owls in the background. Yes. And Hemlock says, as someone with schizophrenia, honestly, the second just feels to me like being scared of the dark and seeing eyes and face forming from the shade, which owls look like. Yeah. Something must have happened to the artist, I guess. Yes. I wouldn't have picked the pictures if there wasn't any, yeah, let's say at least I think conclusion is the wrong word because it says there's one truth, but that's of course not the truth. There's always more than one truth, right? But there is one backstory to this, let's say it that way. And yes, that's I picked that picture again. So the compilation of these paintings by Lewis show how his depiction of cats has changed over time. And one can see that the structure of the cats is becoming increasingly dissolved and ornamented. And in later pictures, one only sees the eyes embedded in diffuse colored ornaments, with one recognizes in these pictures is the character of the mental disorder Louis suffered from and which broke out after a tragic event, and that was schizophrenia. And some background knowledge, like leading symptoms of clinical schizophrenia are often paranoid persecutory. Do I pronounce it correct? Persecutory delusion, indicated in the ominously staring eyes and a dissolution of the ego structures of the self. No, honestly, feels that too. Lol. Yeah, I always assumed the old picture was the pic. Yeah. So that is one of the one of the in one of the really deep stages of can happen that it gets to a total basically total dissolution of the inner structure. And in his pictures you can see that. So when you see from the upper left to the bottom right, you can see how the pictures of cat changes, where we just see the eyes, which is the paranoid aspect, and then just fragmented, colorful, ornamented dissolution of the cats, basically. Yeah. And I've put a small text to that on the right, but basically just mentioned that what we already said and adds a few years and date stamps to it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was kind of debunked as just being artistic evolution of his art and not one-on-one link to schizophrenia. Yes. Yeah. So this was, of course, it's not just his only pictures, right? So this was just to show you, because it has like somehow aligned to it. Of course, he was not totally out of his mind or anything, right? So it's not that he has to be concealed or anything. So he usually he probably, I mean, I don't know exactly. I don't want to say anything wrong, but he should be able to live a normal life, right? But it's a general structure that I wanted to show you here with that pictures. I'm looking at that trippy cat painting while snuggling my cat in real life. What a wonderful Saturday. Yes. And yeah, I would say it's good timing. Let's take a 10-minute break and meet again in 10 minutes. So for here in Germany, it's 5. It should be your time in 10 minutes. And grab something to drink, grab something to eat, and then we can continue. Looking forward to it. So So, back again. And I see that the discussion is going on, which is great. And I hope you had a good recovery time. And I know it's a lot of content, so please bear with me as we diving into the second part of this panel. And we start with the purpose of dreams and the dreams as guides within ourselves. So maybe some of you got a better feeling and understanding of symbols and symbolic contents through this example or these examples. In this section, I would like to focus more on the dream itself. So why do we dream? This question is at least scientifically not yet fully clarified, and there are several biological and psychological approaches out there. I would like to introduce you at least a few of them, and for the course of this panel, let's stick to psychological concepts. So, why do we even dream? So there are basically three main hypotheses out there. So, and those are based on the theories of Carl Jung, for example, just to clarify this. The dream itself is a mixed product of conscious content and subconscious content. And secondly, the dream acts as a regulator of the mental system. And the dream is an illustrator of intrapsychic dynamics. And what those three hypotheses exactly mean, I want to show you in a quick overview. So, the dream is a mixed product of conscious and unconscious. And in order to understand how dream content emerges from the unconscious into the conscious, one can look at Carl Jung's layer model of the unconscious again. So while we sleep, we descend into deeper and deeper areas of the unconscious. Carl Jung calls this part of the self the dream ego that is descending, basically. It is the part of the self that, metaphorically speaking, descends equipped with a lantern and illuminates parts of the unconscious, therefore brings these contents to the surface through the light of consciousness, like a metaphor. The tendencies of the dream ego is the steady descent into the collective unconscious. So if nothing stops the dream ego, it would descend deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. However, this does not succeed because the dream ego gets stuck on its own conflictual topics. And the complexes, which are on the level of the personal unconscious, and the complexes can be the conflicts that we've seen a few slides before. It can be emotions like fear, anger, shame, whatever. And thus what comes into the light of conscious is therefore personal repressed content and not necessarily collective content. But in some instances, especially when a lot of the complexes get psychologically worked out, so for example, through therapy or through personal growth, one can get even deeper all the way to the collective unconscious and get in touch with the archetypal structures there. So yeah, basically what I said, the dream arises from the encounter between the conscious and the unconscious material, and it contains signals and symbols from the unconscious. And the dream ego illuminates a certain area in the unconscious when dreaming or while dreaming and brings it to the light of consciousness. And the dream ego has the tendency to descend further and further down to the collective subconscious and may eventually reach the collective subconscious and pulls up material from there, from the archetypal areas. So the second one, the dream as a regulator of the mental system. What does it mean? So a second hypothesis regarding the cause and utility of dreams is the regulatory one. So the process of a dream or the process of dreams has on the mental system has similar effects that hormones have for the biological system. They are messengers. A driving force in our mental system are our desires and goals, and dreams have a goal to which they are directed. And so basically the unconscious has a plan that it pursues. And so the dreams have a meaning and aim to that goal. And in the end, the dream reflects ourselves. It shows things that we do not want or cannot see and adds puzzle pieces to the overall pictures. So dreams have similar tasks to the mental system, and it usually the unconscious has, like I said, the goal that it strives to. And this is with a lot of our dreams. They have a goal that we are either internally while dreaming pursuing, or in the interpretation. So there are different levels, of course, but usually some goal is can be seen in the dreams. And yeah, the third hypothesis is the dream as an illustration of intrapsychic dynamics. We already seen this in the practical part with the symbolic character to some degree. So the dream shows, with its symbolism and with its drama, similar to a theatrical play, an intrapsychic dynamic. So according to Carl Jung, the dream is a spontaneously occurring self-expression of the current state of the unconscious in symbolic form. And the dream is therefore a communication between the conscious and the unconscious. And through the desires and goals shown in the dream, which stem from one's own unconscious, it serves the process of individuation. And this is pretty crucial in the theoretic building of Carl Jung. So each dream is a messenger from our unconscious, and the goal usually aims to our personal process of individuation. And ultimately and implicitly, that means that by interpreting, or rather working through the material that the dreams offer to us, gets us closer to our true individual selves by working through the complexes. That is basically the main strive that is set in the theory. Yeah, and last but not least, now we had this theoretical background again. I would like to give you the promised little toolkit that you can use for understanding your own dreams better, and that you can at least get an impression or a way how to tackle your own dreams if you write them down during the night or in the morning or whenever. If you do it, then here are some methods and perspectives that can be hopefully helpful to you. So first of all, the question that should arise is, why do I want to analyze? And as I said, symbols and their meaning arise from the interaction of dream content and the effect on the self. Therefore, it is important to clarify the goal of the interpretation that I have with the dream, because ultimately the interpretation gets altered, not biased, but altered by our point of view to which we approach that dream and the impact on it. So is it practice for myself? Do I want to just practice, take a random dream and look at it? Do I want to work on my own dreams therapeutically? Also a good reason. Should I look on the dreams from others? Should I give an interpretation or a point of view to that dream? Is it a therapeutic context important, or is it a context in a I do it for a friend, for example? How close am I to the dreamer? Because if I'm very close to the dreamer, a representation of myself could be in the dream of the dreamer. And as I fill it with my own point of views, this could, of course, have an impact to the dream interpretation. And that's why those are points that should be at least implicitly clear to you when you analyze dreams in general. And just for the cause of, it is helpful to not run into interpretative directions that maybe, not maybe that maybe not the in quote unquote problems of the dreamer, but of the interpretator. So always try to be aware of that. Subject level versus object level. That is a very basic differentiation of how to look upon a dream. So according to Carl Jung's theory, dreams can be viewed on two levels, the subject level and the object level, two levels. It is the perspective that gives a symbol one of the many possible meanings. And by taking the different point of views from the subject level or from the object level, the symbols and the meaning of a dream may alter. And it's not that one point of view is more correct than the other point of view, but they maybe build up a synergy to get a better understanding of the processes inside the dreamer. And what is also very important, what kind of message or what kind of hints can we maybe get out that the dreamer can actually implement into his everyday life. If we dig too deep to the subject level, it may not be as productive for the dreamer itself, because yes, it shows intrapsychic dynamics, but sometimes, especially because this is a lot of the times unconscious content, the dreamer firstly mostly doesn't know about them, and secondly doesn't know how to work with them. And here the object level, the direct interaction can resolve certain or give extra information to that. So basically the subject level means the dream, it is you. So everything in the dream is a part of you, different instances, different persons, the dream stage itself, everything represents in some way a part of the mental system. And contrary to that is the object level. That means taking dreams literally. So a person that shows up in a dream from this point of view, from seeing from the object level, is not an intrapsychic part of the dreamer, but is a representation of the outside person that we see in the dream. That is what is meant with that. And to give some understanding to this, I've put out a small example out of a therapeutic context that I want to show you to get a better understanding how interpretations on the different levels look like. So we have a small snippet from a dream, and to make this a little bit more understandable, let's see this dream from a therapeutic context. And I'm reading it, and maybe you can try to, for you, get what the symbols in the dreams are. It's a short one. So a group was gathered on a green hill. My mother was also there. The goal was to leave the old world and start something new. I wanted to go along, but I did not want to leave the old world. My mother said, we'll go with them for once, and when we'll go with them for once, and then we can jump off in time. We don't have to stay and wait until the end. Or we don't have to stay with it until the end. Short dream. And in this example, before I reveal it, we have some time. What would you say are outstanding symbols? Just point one or two if you see some. What are some symbols that may come to your mind? The mother, the new and old world, yes. Fear of change as a motive, yes. Yeah, this is an interpretation already, yes. Green Hill is nature, old versus new, nature, family, a transition, afterlife. So what is a common, would not say flaw because it is too far-fetched, but what's a common thing here is that we already, before isolating possible symbols, already go into the next step to the interpretation. And before we interpret this, usually it's good to have an idea of what symbols this dream contains. And of course, those that I'm going to show you here now are just three possible symbols. Of course, they interact to each other, and it also has like a meaning as the dream itself, and not just looking at the very analytical symbol level. Yes. So what we see here, I've read it a couple of times. We have the group that wants to leave as a symbol. We have leaving the old world as a symbolic act, and we have the mother. And let me just check. The group, you can say the dream within a therapeutic context, and when you look at the symbols, you can say that the group is basically a series of people unknown to the patient. It's a collective, and symbolizes something from his or her or its collective unconsciousness. Here, in a deeply unconscious layer, there is obviously a movement and a mood departure. This corresponds to a spontaneous impulse for development from the unconscious. And just a little side note, I've noticed that because I took this from a textbook and translated it, there may be some conflicts with pronouns. So if sometimes I just say he or she, it's just because it's of the translation. I try to be aware of that, but please bear with me with that and don't think bad about me. So, second one, leaving the old world. The point here is not that the patient should move somewhere externally or spatially, but it's rather on the subject level is connected with the old world, means that his previous mental state is meant by the old world, and his previous attitude towards life maybe, and from which the patient is set out for something new. And then we have the mother. The dream image mother could be an unconscious facet of the patient here, who does not want to commit herself and who goes along non-committically. It could also be the patient's matriarchal archetype, like archetype mother, which gives a positive statement and persuades the ego out of female wisdom to simply begin the undertaking and start transitioning from his mental state from the old land or the old world to a new mental state. And here we already see this, the goal of the dream, or the where the dream or the unconscious motivation is happening. And thereby the archetypal layer takes away the fear of the ego. So because the mother, and as we may interpret this as an archetypal instant, may take away the fear of moving from the old mental state into the new mental state. And now, looking at it from the object level, I'm taking a different dream from this for this, because on the object level of understanding the dream elements are assumed to be identical with the real object of the external world. So the meaning of the dream on the object level concerns the relationship of the dreamer between the dream instance and the people or things he sees inside the dream. Things or circumstances that are familiar, and the symbolic character on this level is not too high, because we don't look at the actual symbol, but we take it as a literal object, and we see, or we try to look at the interaction of the object inside the dream. So here again, a little example. I went to the beach with my daughter and wanted to go swimming there. By chance, the teacher was there too. He totally ignored me completely. He was lying on the beach in a group of people. I then also pretended as if he was not there. So through the dream, she is told in no uncertain terms that the relationship with the teacher is a phantom of her desire, that he wants nothing to do with her and that she should stop such fantasies. And with the support of the dream, she can now try to stop such recurring fantasies about the English teacher and stop imaging them. And just remember, this is out of a therapeutic session of a textbook. It's just an example. So the patient suffered from paranoid schizophrenia again, with amorous paranoia, if it rings a bell. And amorous paranoia was so distinct that the patient consciously could not be dissuaded from the fact that the teacher would love her. Only through the dream and the inner messages could she slowly distance herself from it. And this is, of course, not something that is generally done in one session, but it was, of course, a therapeutic process. And what we see here is just a depiction and an interpretation, very, very condensed in a very short form. So it's not that we have that interpretation and then the patient said, off we go, I know everything. It's work, of course, because if it wasn't, then there wouldn't be a problem. Yeah, here having both levels again taken into consideration, and that you see again which what's the meaning of the different perspective you can take in a dream. And this is just take as a thing for a therapeutic context. I put it in there. You shouldn't take it too seriously when you go through your own dream, because it's a totally different setting. You usually don't dig so deep in it, but usually if a person out of experience, I can say is a person is very destabilized. It's usually not very good to go direct into the subject level, because it could destabilize the person even to a greater extent. So usually be more on the object level, because if one is very destabilized on the inside, and we see, just remember the pictures from Dali, and has no inner structure, it's important to give him structure on the outside world, and thus taking dreams literally may achieve this goal better. But I've added this because of the therapeutic content of the snippets I've presented you. Just keep in mind, maybe. So in the end, the final thing that we all should ask for is, am I ready for this? And I don't really want to put this out as a warning or so. It is something that, because actually dream interpretation, it emerges from us, right? It is something that enriches and helps us on our personal path. And it's usually unconscious material is not, it doesn't act in that way that if we don't look at it, it doesn't have an impact on us. And that's a fallacy, right? The most of the problems we experience, what we say mental problems that we may have, or conflicts, are there because it has an impact on us, but we are not aware of it. We're not conscious about it. And that is the thing. And this is also what the theory of Carl Jung is about, of growing and laying off the masks and see what lies beneath the mask, the persona. So, but one should be aware that the interpretation of a dream works on both sides, like on the dreamer and on the one who's interpreting the dream. In the end, one's own issues and unpleasant feelings can be activated, which is one of the reasons why in the training to become a mental professional, for example, there's always self-experience and self-therapy that needs to be done, because that it's not only in working on a dream level, but in general working in a relation with patients, for example. It's so that it's always good to have as much conscious material, as much conscious, to be as conscious as you can be about yourself. I think that is the important part. So metaphorically speaking, we get the forms from the dream, the raw mental energies in front of us, and we fill them with our own structures. And basically, we with our being, let's say that way. That is how I perceive it. At least we flow into those structures that are presented in the dream symbols and the messages, and we feel them. And by looking at ourselves, how we react to those, that is the moment when we get like some an interpretation that just clicks for us, right? Because we share that experience, we ourselves draw from that collective unconsciousness. We have maybe we have made these experiences. Of course, that you can add several, also several spiritual interpretations to this. The concept is totally open, and this is actually what I like about this concept. Yeah, okay, the audio gets tilted. I hope it's fine for everyone. Because in the end, I didn't notice anything. Okay, perfect. So of course not perfect for you, Ghost. I hope you can resolve this, but then it's nothing on my side here. So yeah, I would say if you're ready, let's take some dives and some dream analysis examples, or at least do one. I initially had two prepared, but I think one would suit because this panel is so long. PT code, let's go. Yes, it was. So this was actually, this is how I perceive this. And this actually, the quote from PT is very, it hits a point, because when you connect in a way with the mental system of one another, it's like stepping through a door into a separate reality. And in the end, you meet in the inside the gap of the door, like on both sides. That's how I perceive it. PT demo, yes, I really like this demo, but yes, should go into the example. So, and for this, I'm giving you some time to read it. I hope. Can you still read it? Is the stream running? It should be, right? Yep, it is. Okay. So take a few minutes to read this example, read the stream. And I have to say, I would like to point out that this dream is from Amber, that he had a couple of years ago. And that's why I also put him up as a co-presenter here on the stage. And before we take a dive at the interpretation, I would like again say many thanks to you, Amber, that you provided us this very personal piece of personal experience here, and that you allow us to make an interpretation with this. So thank you.
Sure. I need to read it again myself, actually.
Do it. Yes, take your time. Let's take like 2 minutes or 3 minutes. Just take your time reading it, and then we tackle that step by step. No, it's not Google Translate.
No, I've tried it. If anybody finds a meaning, I'd be surprised. But just to add, this stream it was really one of the most intense dreams I ever had. I think top three most intense dreams I ever had.
Yeah, before we actually start and try to analyze it, so maybe you can tell something about this dream. What was your experience during or after this dream?
During, as far as I remember, well, it was a bit uncomfortable because I was sitting in that chair, you see, and I couldn't see the entities behind me. I had the impression they were aliens, so there were about three, I think. I could hear them talk and talk about me, but that's in the text. I did know that it was a dream, so it was lucid. And I'd struggled to not wake up because my feeling was clearly that I was to receive a very important message. And I clearly struggled to keep dreaming and to not wake up. And then at the end of the thing, it's also mentioned in the text, I thanked them, and I did so more than once. So I was really thankful to have gotten that message. And afterwards, that continued, yes. And but then, of course, I was just going like, hey, what can it mean? What is a squigma? And I just researched it and couldn't find anything. It's still a mystery nowadays. Yeah, I mean, there might be additional dreams that could play a role, but that's already going into the interpretation. I don't want to do that now.
Yes. So first of all, what I was just reading, some dreams are not dreams. They sound like a ceremony that took place in Astro. Yes. And the thing is, when, like I said, it's always there is no right or wrong. There are multiple aspects and multiple perspectives that we can shine upon a dream, and the interpretation for us personally and maybe for our environment and surroundings. So what we will see here in the interpretation that I did, that I was trying to, basically cling myself on the concepts that I presented here to you. So it's important, at least from my side point of view, to have a very, let's say it, a kind of manualized approach to it. And then from this baseline, you can widen the interpretation and see, okay, you can, wow, it can be interpreted in a different kind of sense, or maybe this is a different idea, or maybe this is a different aspect from myself here. So that's so I can say that's exactly right what Arya said. So some dreams are not dreams. I would say every dream is not a dream, as paradox as it may sound, because there's always more than one perspective to look upon. And I would encourage everyone to keep that in mind. And because for myself, especially when I have to deal with clinical psychology and the contents in a clinical setting, on one side, I have my interpretations and my point of views and feelings to this. And on the other side, I have to give the patient and everyone a framework to in a surrounding that can be accepted, and that's very important to, on the one side, be aware of, but on the other side, that those concepts and theoretical constructs don't narrow your view, because in the end, reality is not something that a theory can grasp. Theory is always a condensate of reality, is always just a projection. And a projection usually is missing dimensions. So just as a starting idea. Okay. Yep. I would say I'll give you some ideas and we can talk about the ideas during the dream. So what basically many dreams have in common is that they start in the middle of the act by yourself, or it's also depicted in, or not depicted, but set in the movie Inception, if you have seen it. If you haven't, great watch. One of my favorite movies. That usually they start in the middle of somewhere. The dream ego is in some sort of action or in some sort of progression, or usually you don't start in basically in your bed where you went to sleep, right? So therefore, it is important to first find out where the dream starts. So in this example, what is the base setting of the dream? And in this setting, the dream starts during a ritual. So it culminated in an initiation ritual, where I met some beings. And Amber, just because it is also your dream, and I mean we talked about it already. But if you had some annotations or something, just unmute yourself and roar like the most dragonly roar you can make if something is different that you perceive differently.
Okay, I will.
Okay, so like the dream starts during a ritual, so the process is already underway because the ritual is not to be started, but it's right in the middle of the ritual, right? So to speak.
Yeah, hang on. Oh,
Yes.
I need maybe first spark in the. You see, it culminated. So what it means is that the dream it had a previous story. Yeah. So it wasn't actually starting at that point, but I was in a kind of building and there was kind of Chinese monk or something similar, and then I was somehow set into that seat. Yeah. So that it did have a previous story.
It had a previous story. Okay. But from this snippet, we can say that the base setting is somewhere a ritual, or
Yeah.
let's say close to a ritual, right? So
Yeah.
in the monk, and then you were put into that chair, right?
Right. That perfect. Yeah.
Okay. So if you look, and now we can also and already have an idea of a ritual, because we all have certain ideas what a ritual is, and that is where our own knowledge gets into the symbol. So if you look at the meaning of ritual, you can say that a ritual is often used as a communicative tool or a communicative means to speak with the divine or with higher entities during a sacred act. So the context of the dream basically is, you can say, a sacred act, something very, very sacred is happening. And the space is to communicate with the divine or higher. And when you clear that out, you can have an idea, like you can try to find out what activity the dream ego currently is doing. I mean, here is this not so much activity to find, but what is the dream ego doing at the start of the dream? So in this dream, for example, where's my mouse? There. In this dream, the dream ego lies on a strongly back inclined chair. It cannot move, cannot speak, and generally cannot express itself. So already as a point of interpretation, you can say that this is a certain rigidity to the dream ego. So it's immobile in the present state. So it cannot really move. And I was sitting in a heavily reclined chair, could barely move or speak, and the dream starts with the rigidity and immobility. Basically, you are anchored to the armchair, barely able to move. Is this correct so far?
Yeah.
Was it?
Totally.
Okay. Yeah. So in the next step, when we cleared the base setting, so what is the dream ego doing? Where does the dream start? We can have an idea, or we can try to have an idea, okay, do we sense some kind of base conflict in the dream? So because the conflict, as we seen it in a few slides prior, is like a driving force. It's in a mental energy. The dream ego often encounters its own conflicts during the descent into the personal unconscious and further down to the collective unconscious, and brings them to the surface. So what conflict generally have as a characteristic is that they, like I said, carry mental energy, because they are points of friction, if you can say it that way. They have a certain, there's a friction point in that. Um, and the mental system wants to point out something special by depicting this friction point, because you can see a dream also, and that is also something in the in the guidelines from Carl Jung, that the dream is basically set and like a play, it has like its culmination points, and it has some conflicts in it. And a dream conflict you can see metaphorically pretty similar to a conflict in a theatrical play. So what is the base conflict here? So first, what stood out for me at least was they were standing behind, I was sitting. So you have a polarity, like they stood behind me versus I was sitting. Then you see polarities in software and nanotechnology, so technology versus liquid, versus the beer-like liquid that was poured over your chest at the end of the dream. So the use of resources and settings in the dream give you a hint of what the conflict is. So on the one hand, we have technology. It's a versus, on the other hand, it's a liquid that is instilled into the dream ego. So if we look at the symbolic character of technology, what in our cultural sense, what is technology? So technology has something very, and this is just my interpretation of it, right? So everyone, of course, has their own, and this is the key element of interpreting, right? So when I was interpreting this, I was thinking, okay, technology has something very masculine to it. So this is how technology works. It often consists of rigid, angular structures that operate in fixed sequences, like in a computer on a PC. You have algorithms. So always the same pattern that runs through. It's always uniformly in order to get to a solution, and it is artificial. That's also like a point. Technology is basically man-made. On the other hand, liquids have an opposite quality. Usually they have, like I mentioned with the water, they have round shapes, at least when there's no gravity to them. So they can symbolize like a more feministic or female characteristic. So when we see water as the cradle of life, for example, that it is depicted in some myths, and therefore, liquids are highly adaptive and flexible, in contrast to technology, which is very rigid and not very flexible. And the conflict of the dream seems to be, from my point of view, something between control versus dependency, because on the one hand, you have like this autonomy that you want to get, but on the other side you are restrained to the chair, and this seems to me like some sort of baseline conflict, if you would say this. So your autonomy is taken by the ritual itself and by the aliens, and but you basically inside the dream you somehow want it back. What would you say to this? I know I shot from the hip. Are you still there?
Yeah, but I was typing. What was the question again? Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah. So I think like what I read out of this dream and as an interpretation of mine, and it's important how you resonate with it. So one of the core conflicts that I see in this dream are um, autonomy versus dependency. So because you have that rigid technology, and on the other side, the liquid, which contrasts this technology in terms of interpretative meanings. What would you say?
Mm, autonomy versus dependency. I don't see why control versus dependency. How is that actually? It doesn't resonate much.
Mm.
I mean, control is a very important topic for me, but I resonate more with the idea of male versus female, or maybe better, technology versus nature. maybe the liquid could represent nature somehow. And I was just also typing that maybe well, the entities, the aliens, explain technology to me as if it was a part of me. And I think a squig, that's also what a squigma is. My interpretation of squigma is that it's a combination of technology and nature in some way, and that is also what I am. But it's still not, yeah, it's still confusing. I mean, there's nothing much to it. But
Yeah.
yeah, again, autonomy versus dependency, I don't know.
I've written autonomy versus dependency because this is a core conflict that can be broken down to this. So, but what you say, I think it's more important what you say here than what my interpretation is, because, like I said, it's always the meeting point of our two realities. Like it's my interpretation of you. So, but it's interesting that you said like technology, would you say from your point of view that technology is something that needs control or needs to be controlled?
I would say yes.
Yes. And on the other side, what would you say to natural and to nature itself? Does nature needs to be controlled?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. So we have this contrast here again, right?
Right.
And I think in my point of view, what is pretty, and just to know to everyone, this is not a therapeutic setting here, so we can just talk freely about it. Because I know Amber, and I know that he gave us the stream, and we can talk about it. So this is basically exactly what the goal of the dream is trying to tell you, that at least from my point of view, right? From my point of view, that the mixture of both is the way to go. It's not the standardized and every time the same way running routines that get you to your goal, because it makes you in the end immobilize. And but it is the addition to the liquid. And what is pretty interesting here for me, that what I saw in this resolution of the dream, that at the end the being started a new phase of initiation by dumping half a glass of golden beer liquid over my chest, swallowed a bit, and then woke up. So in many cases, the dream offers a resolution to the conflict or a hint on how to resolve it, because the nature of the conflict is that we cannot resolve it consciously, and that's why it is unconscious. That's like the baseline of it. And we talked about regulation of the mental system. So the first association I had with this liquid, with this golden liquid that is getting poured on you, and now everyone don't feel upset by it, but first of all, I thought about urine. And now, of course, everyone was thinking, why urine? And does this have something strange to it? But no, it's like I said, it's just a symbol, right? Not don't get wrong thoughts. So if you think of where does urine come from, it comes from the kidneys. So the organism has two of them, so separate from each other, and yet they are doing the same work. So in traditional Chinese medicine, for example, the kidneys are associated with water element. And water is seen, among other things, as the symbol of withdrawal, transformation, and the source of self-confidence. It gives us basically, according to traditional Chinese medicine, courage to start things. It's just, like I said, it's just one point of view. So the water is poured on your chest, virtually on your heart. So here we have again a contrast, because the heart is associated in traditional Chinese medicine with the fire element. And fire is associated inside this this TCM for lust for life, the thirst for action, the drive to do something, to change something. Like something needs to be put into action and doesn't have to be stuck still and resolved in doing nothing. So my interpretation of this dream, and so my idea of the stream would be the message that is transported in this stream, basically. The raw message is that the resolution is that both sides are needed. So the differences must be united. So because the dream is set up in total indifferences, nature, technique, water, fire, rigidity versus mobility. So transformation can only happen when something is done, and this step needs courage. And in the end of the dream, basically the process is already starting. So it's I would say it's a very positive dream because you swallowed some of the liquid. That means you take these qualities inside of you, and yeah, the process is working. And that what would be interesting. So this because this is like you said, approximately 2 years have passed, and I don't know if or what you like to share. What would you say that something in your, let's say, perception of the world or your own what you want to do with your life has changed? Did you do some new steps in life that were, yeah, important and took some time to accomplish?
Yes, the process is still ongoing, I think. But I clearly feel that I've gotten closer to myself, and somehow the world has gotten more distant. It's just that it nowadays I feel more like an alien. If I take a look at the world outside and what happens there, I feel more and more wrong being here. So that might be, I would attribute that to the process. I'm coming closer to myself, but the world is getting more distant. That is one thing. And again, another thing I wanted to mention maybe about this technology nature conflict, it's and also the alien stuff. This is a very common motive in my dreams, a very common dream sign. I recently had one where I saw myself flying in a dragon squadron. I didn't know where we were flying at, but I just saw myself there, and then I noticed that underneath me another object was flying, and it turned out that it was a kind of spaceship. So I don't know. It again shows that there is some kind of relation, collaboration maybe between me, which might represent nature and life and technology. Yeah. So I basically see technology as a threat, and I do have a natural anxiety of technology, but maybe there's a way to combine the two. I don't know. So that is maybe also a part of the process to just yeah to just find out about that. I don't know.
So in the end, would you say that maybe if I lay myself a little bit out of the window, that you were becoming the alien that in your dream was putting you on the chair?
Mm, maybe if we interpret it in the subjective way, then the alien should represent a part of me, and
Yeah.
that all. I mean, it does make sense. It does make sense in a way. Aliens actually in my dreams always represent technology, always, and it would indicate that technology is in some way a part of me. And that is also what I understand as Squigma is now. Yeah. So a Squigma would be I imagine a Squigma now as kind of shape-shifting creature that modifies reality on a quantum level, and it also can shapeshift into a dragon, and that pretty much resonates. And also can shapeshift into technical objects. Yeah. So for example, metal. I always envision metal. Uh, yeah. So shaping my arms into blades or something, or yeah, very fast. Yeah. So fluid type of metal. That's what I imagine when I hear the term squigma now. Yeah. But I mean, there's a lot of imagination going into there. Yeah. So I don't know if that's what the aliens meant
Yeah.
originally. I have no idea.
I mean, like we pointed out, there is no right or wrong, right? There's it's all a matter of perspective. But Yeah, I see we have 5 before 6, and I don't want to make it any longer than it should be. So I'm going to share the slides somehow so that you also can maybe look at the literature. I don't know how or where, but I'm going to talk to the mods about it. I thank you for being a part of this, and I hope I didn't. Yeah, I hope it wasn't too much for you because it was a lot of content. Like I said, maybe rewatch it at another time. But for those who are here, thank you for sticking with me and for doing this with me. I was nervous as hell. I'm honest about this, and yeah, I hope every one of you could draw something out of it. That was my goal at the start. That even though if you cannot grasp everything, at least you can grasp something that is important to you personally, and that was important for me because, yeah, like I said, this topic is very important to me and also part of my personality and who I am. Then, thank you a lot. And thanks, Amber, for being here with me, of course. That you took your time also and offered the stream again.
Yeah, I love it.
And
Thanks for inviting.
if you have specific questions to the podium, I think the next panel or the next watch party is going to start in a few minutes. Just let's go to the panel questions if a thread has emerged there, and I'm going to try to write some answers so that we don't spoil the other panels here and we don't overstrain the time that we took for this. So, like I said, thank you all, and see ya in the upcoming panels, and I'm looking forward to every one of it. Bye.